What's up, guys? My name's Josh. I'm the Director of Curriculum Instruction here at the Collective School of Music, Sound Collective here in New York City, 28 Broadway, and I'm excited today to bring you a brand new podcast we have called The Collective Community, where we introduce you to our teachers, our faculty, our staff, and some of the alumni that have attended school here. And I'm super excited to bring you one of my good friends today, an amazing teacher, amazing mentor, a legend in the electronic music community here in New York City. We have Lefty. What's up, man? How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Dude, I'm honored, man. It's good to sit down and talk to you. Obviously, we've known each other for a couple years now, I think. It's been a couple years. Yeah. And, I met you through Rich Furness, who is one of my really good friends. And I know you guys have worked on a couple records together.
Yep.
And, it's a pleasure to be sitting here with you, man.
Thank you, likewise.
So I guess we'll get right into it, man. So we'll start first. Obviously you're one of our lead mentors here at Sound Collective. Not only are you an amazing musician, electronic artist these days with your projects in house and disco and that kind of thing, but also in the past with band. I mean, you play a lot of live instruments. You create a lot of your own samples. You've done courses for us on sampling as well as DJing. You're kind of the complete package, man. So, why don't you give a little bit about yourself, and kind of like how you got to this point? Like, how did you, navigate the world of music?
Yeah, it's funny. I guess I've had a lot of musical lives, I like to say, Done a lot of different things over the years, which has kind of always kept it really interesting for me. But kind of going way back to the beginning of the story, growing up in Connecticut and Florida, kind of got split after I did high school in Florida. So Connecticut was everything before then. So that's kind of where I started getting influenced by my brothers who were super into music. Started playing guitar when I was 13, which is kind of right around the time I moved down to Florida. And then kind of just started meeting new people and finding the musicians and hanging with them because I was into that. And, this was in the mid 90s. So guitar music was really big then. And it was really inspiring. Nirvana, all that stuff was going on.
Yeah, the era of what I guess what we call it, punk. I guess more like that.
There's definitely
emo punk was kind of on its way up too during that time.
I was into all that stuff, and coming from Metallica and stuff like that from the late '80s was when I started really getting interested in it. And then so guitar was my first instrument, so I started playing that. Started playing cover songs with my friends and started writing our own songs in high school and starting bands and playing some local competitions and stuff. And then so right at the end of high school, I started playing shows,
Nice.
I started going to a lot more concerts then. I was 17, 18. And
so let me ask you this. Were you, you said you started primarily in high school with the guitar and learning those things. Were you taking music classes in high school, or were you just kind of learning on your own?
No, actually, it's a funny story about that. When I went into high school, I didn't get into music. I did some choir classes for a little bit in middle school, and I would do some singing and stuff like that. And in my grade school, we had music class always, so that's where I was kind of always participating and getting into that stuff. But in high school, I didn't do any music classes, but my electives kind of put me into cooking classes, which inspired me to go to culinary school after high school.
Took one of the questions right out of my mouth, man. I was going to say, because originally I know that music actually wasn't your first path or first career thought originally.
It was always my first path.
Oh yeah?
Cooking was my secondary option, the realistic one, that my parents supported.
Sure.
Me and all my brothers all tried to put out the option to be hey, can we go to music school for college? And they're nope. There's no career there for you, so find something that'll make you some money consistently.
It's interesting to hear that too, because I feel like these days, especially, that whole idea, because I was the same way. You know what I mean? You didn't really go to college for music. It was kind of looked at as a hobby more, I guess, in a sense, with the older community.
Totally.
To pursue a career in music was almost saying that you were going to be poor for the rest of your life, essentially.
Totally, yeah.
And so I feel like that whole mentality around that has kind of changed because you have different things popping up now. With the DJ schools and stuff like that. I mean, even early 2000s, saying you wanted to be a DJ, there really wasn't a school to go to for that. So, so I totally get that, man, with the culinary school route and everything. So fast forward a little bit. So you're in Florida for a while. when did you come to New York City, and why did you make that decision to move to New York? Because there's LA, there's Chicago, there's Atlanta, there's all these different music cities, essentially. I know New York City is kind of viewed as the Mecca, but why did you come there?
Well, I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut, which is just outside the city, so I came here a lot growing up. Like every birthday party in like 5th and 6th grade was at Benihana in Midtown. You know, so I had a lot of memories. We'd go to the Met every year for like my school trips and stuff like that. So I always really loved the city, and I think like being in South Florida, everybody's from New York, and a lot of people talk about New York, and everybody's always like, I'm gonna go back to New York, and I kind of was like, I'm never gonna move back to New York, fuck that, you know? Sorry, I don't know if I can curse.
That's fine, do it,
okay,
it's cool.
So,
be yourself.
Shit.
That's right.
So I was like, you know, I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm going to culinary school, like I need to focus on this. Like I was always doing music, like working in South Florida in restaurants. They're very seasonal down there, so I could tour during the summer. So I was started touring in like 1999, you know? So through the early 2000s, I was kind of doing both, pursuing both kind of things as much as I could. Do music when I can, and then just cook to make money, you know? But I ended up, like I was in this relationship with this girl. It was the first like girlfriend I ever moved in with. I had my band that was kind of starting to get really frustrated because we always had rotating band members, and it was pretty much me and the singer, and I was always like,
that right there is a problem, right?
I mean, I did
That's another story, man.
That's a whole other story. I did everything, you know, I wrote all the songs with the singer, and then like I was pretty much in charge of all the music and booked all those tours and everything.
The music director, huh?
Oh, I did it all, dude, yeah. I was our agent, director, manager, all the hats. And so finally, like I broke up with my girlfriend, I ended up ending the band, and I moved, I was living in Orlando at the time. I ended up moving back to South Florida, where I went to high school. So,
which was where?
In Boca Raton.
Boca Raton.
Yeah, the home of Dashboard Confessional and Ariana Grande.
Look at this. Look at this.
And me.
Yeah, that's right.
But and my buddy Ryland, who I joined a band with later on that I'll get into shortly. So I moved down to South Florida for this potential restaurant opportunity. This was in like 2004, so I was already done with culinary school. I was a sous chef at restaurants and did all these jobs in restaurants and stuff.
This man cooks beats and food.
That's right.
You know?
Always in the lab of some sort. Some got heat, some got hotter heat.
Ooh!
Anyway, just being silly. I get this restaurant opportunity. I say, great, I'll move back down there. If it doesn't happen in 6 months, then I need to figure something else out. So I moved down to South Florida. It was kind of a weird point in my time. And did my band that was actually getting a lot of recognition in many places. My relationship ended. I previously had my own business that I got screwed over by my partner who stole all my money and screwed me up. So I was like rock bottom.
This guy's dropping gems, guys, because I feel like this is a very similar path that a lot of musicians take. One thing I just want to point out, which what you just said, is you kind of gave yourself a timeline, right? Essentially, you're like, I'm gonna really focus on this. And I think this is something that we can touch on a little bit later, but is a gem. It's a really important thing when you decide, same for me, when I decided to move to New York and really pursue a career, I had to make sure that was my focus point. Right? Nothing else going on. And essentially, it's kind of what you're saying too, right?
My whole life,
Yeah.
I think has been like that. Always the focus on music. Everything else is just to do this, you know?
Sure.
Yeah, so I go down there and things kind of weren't happening. And that's when I started DJing actually, because I was partying a lot in Miami. I was living at home again, you know, and I was like 24 years old. And I made friends with some promoters, some guys that threw some great events, and we started doing all that, and it was awesome. You know, we got treated really well. I started DJing and stuff down there. It was awesome. Had a great time. A friend of mine moved down there also kind of in a similar scenario. He's like, I'm moving back to New York. He had lived here for a while. And he was one of my friends that actually, of many that said they were gonna move to New York after high school and did, and most of them did not. He's like, I'm gonna move back in a little bit. And I was like, you know what? I think I need to get out of here, and I'm gonna come with you because I saw the end of my life flash before my eyes. I was like, if I stay down here and I get what I'm actually trying to achieve, like, I'm just gonna be working 80 hours at a restaurant, fucking pulling my hair out, and I'm gonna lose my shit. I'm gonna retire. I'm gonna be retired at like 35. You know, like it's really hard to sustain a relationship in that business, and like those are things that I want. Burn
yourself out too,
dude. Yeah, like most chefs that are successful are like divorced alcoholics. You know, that's the sad truth. Unless they become like superstars and personalities. But from there, I ended up moving to New York. I got a job at Whole Foods in South Florida so that I could transfer to New York. And I transferred to New York and I delivered groceries for 9 months in the city.
It's a good way to learn the city, right?
It was the best experience. Actually, I got to see insane apartments, condos, and celebrities and drop off their stuff, and you know, it was really easy money and learn the streets and just get to do it. Because back then there were only 2 Whole Foods in New York City, to really date myself. And so we delivered all around Manhattan. It was the whole island pretty much.
Sure.
And then they opened Union Square and all that stuff, which was all just kind of, that's right around the time I left. So, and then shortly after then, you know, I was playing in a band in New York with my buddy from high school who also moved here. We started a band called This Is Ivy League that was kind of like folky, like 60s pop. So it was like some Beatles, some Simon and Garfunkel, and then some modern indie flavors like Belle and Sebastian, stuff.
So you guys are doing mostly covers at this time, or was it
No, we were
original?
doing original
So
music.
that's just the style of music, very similar.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
just to kind of put it in like a soundscape.
Sure.
And so we were playing around the city, you know, Delancey, all these places, Bell House that have been around forever, Knitting Factory when it was down in here.
Yeah.
Not too far from here, I guess. And, you know, we ended up joining, we got an offer through some friends that we made to join the band Cobra Starship.
It's a big point. It's a big,
this was a big point, yeah. So my very first neighbor when I moved to New York was a musician. I met his roommates, he was on tour. And they're like, yeah, he'll be back soon. And so like a few months later, I met my first like non-Florida friend because I moved here with Florida people.
Sure.
And a lot of people came with us. So we had like 15, we had a deep
The Florida
crew.
clique, huh?
Yeah, big
Florida,
time.
Florida crew.
And I started making friends outside of the circle, which they hated. But one of them was my dear friend, Rob Hitt, who has been in the music industry for a very long time also. He played in a band called Midtown. And the singer from his band, as they were ending their band, started another band and needed band members. And he's like, I think there's a lot of potential here. You and your buddy Ryland, who was in This Is Ivy League with me, should join this band. At least give it a shot.
You guys were creating kind of like your own Voltron, Megatron
So yeah,
style
because
band.
Gabe would come to our shows. He was the guy from Midtown who then started Cobra Starship. And he's like, you guys should join my band. We're like, well, what does that mean for our band? Because we started doing really well. We were getting a lot of good support from like Pitchfork and Vice and great, you know.
The big blogs.
They were big blogs then, yeah. So it was a really good look.
So for those who may not be familiar, who are watching, if you had to, what are some of Cobra Starship's standout songs that you would say for those who may not be familiar with the genre?
So there were a few. Cobra Starship was a whole interesting journey because it was about 9 years for me in that band, 8 or 9 years.
Where you wore many hats for that too, correct me if I'm wrong, right?
I wore many hats for that. Yeah, I did a lot of the music directing stuff there, all the live sound sampling and stuff like that, and wrote and produced a bunch of songs also with the band. But it kind of started like this small little, I started with a very big buzzy track actually, which Gabe did a cover of Gwen Stefani's Bananas. And then he did Snakes on a Plane. Or no, he did Katy Perry's I Kissed a Boy cover.
Yeah, right, because that was around the time I Kissed a Girl was huge, and there was like, they did
so
the,
he started doing these cover songs and they started blowing
it's
up.
awesome.
Big time.
Which
like
is
on
interesting
MySpace.
because if everybody remembers, like around the time, I would say, you know, this was kind of the rise of electronic music. I mean, as far as like in the pop world, right?
Yeah.
It's starting to kind of get more recognition, more synthy style sounds, that kind of thing.
Totally, yeah.
And
well, Cobra kind of pioneered the
Exactly,
sound
yes,
for that, and like
yes.
the neon looks and all that stuff was like a
Totally,
thing that
I would totally agree with that.
which was like bittersweet because it's like it's a look, you know,
Yeah.
and it's a hard one to pull off. But
Sure.
you know, if you get a bunch of people to do it collectively, it works.
Yeah, sure. Pun intended, by the way.
Yes,
Collectively.
that's right.
Good job, good plug.
Thank you.
I like that. That was great.
I got you. But yeah, so the band kind of had some weird moments because they had some like real shots of like sparky, you know, entertainment, and then that kind of garnered like new fans that were like, oh, not everybody knows this, but like it's kind of mine. So he put out a first album and started touring, and we were opening for Gym Class Heroes on their first headlining tour, which is all like 500 capacity clubs.
Yeah,
Very small tour.
That's crazy to think
was
about. 'Cause
wild,
those guys were
They got
huge.
massive.
Yeah.
And sorry, I keep saying I'm allowed. I'm just trying
Man.
rack
This
my
is
story in my brain.
it's all good, man.
We started, you know, doing that kind of touring, and so their fans would kind of latch on to us, and they felt really personal to us, and we didn't really have any big songs yet, or we felt really personal to them. Gabe also had the song for Snakes on a Plane, Bring It, which is the soundtrack song for the movie Snakes on a Plane, that ended up being really massive. It got like 1 million streams overnight on MySpace, which like blew up. Started getting
the
radio
MySpace
spin
days,
on
man.
radio spins in LA. Yeah, right. What a throwback.
Hey, yeah, honestly, those are the good times, man. A lot of people got discovered on that.
Big time, man, big time. It was like the pre-SoundCloud, and then SoundCloud had its moment, and now what is it? Spotify, I guess? I don't know.
I guess.
It's hard to find people.
It's hard to find, side note, I guess. It's hard to find good blogs nowadays or good places where you can upload your music and a lot of people are going to hear it and you can do rough drafts. The SoundCloud era, man, that was like, in MySpace was the same way. I actually was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago about MySpace particularly, and how Fall Out Boy really had a time where that was like, they were like the first big band to really embrace MySpace, and they would put these demos up there. I feel like that was an era, man.
Nice. Yeah, we ended up touring with them a lot because we had the same management.
Oh, okay.
A lot. I've actually been working on something with Pete now. A whole nother conversation.
Oh boy, exclusive. That's awesome, man. That's awesome to hear.
They're good guys.
I'm not surprised, man. I mean, one thing I want to say, particularly because I know you touched on like the music direction and the production and a lot of stuff that you do, but you're also an instrumentalist too. So what instruments? Because this was for those of you who don't know, Cobra Starship was not just like an electronic band, as in like you were DJing or playing synths. You guys were also using acoustic instruments mixed in with synthesis and that kind of thing. So why don't you tell the people a little bit about? I know you said you were playing guitar, early on, but then you had to switch with Cobra Starship, right?
I had to switch. That's actually a great story. The band had just kind of like finished the first album, and the guy who was originally going to play bass for the band backed out at the last minute. And the manager...
Stories of bands, man.
Yeah, so...
We could do a whole podcast on these things.
We were like 2 weeks away from playing the very first show, and he backs out, and the manager calls us, and he's like, hey, we actually only need one guitar player, because we both came on as guitar players, Ryland and I. And he's like, we only need one guitar player. Can one of you guys play bass? So we're like, fuck, what do we do? So we flipped the coin. I lost. I became the bass player of Cobra Starship, which is hilarious.
So how long did you have to learn stuff before you were supposed to start doing these shows and stuff like that?
Yeah, just a couple of weeks probably for that. Yeah, we had a lot of
guys,
rehearsals.
I'm gonna tell you, I'm not just saying this, I really believe this. This dude shreds. Like, I've heard some records that you've done, and they are insane, bro.
Thank you.
Because like I always assumed, I know that you and Rich did a track, I think if I remember, this was a while ago, and this was before we even met, and he played me this bass, and I was like, who played bass on this? This is insane. And he was like, this is Lefty. And I was like, yo, this is wild. Because, for me, I'd never really heard much live bass on like housey music. I know this is fast forwarding in our timeline that we're talking about, but just to let everybody know, based on the story I've heard from you and the things you've told me about your career path, to understand that you played guitar for such a long period of time and then just switched to a bass. And for those of you who don't know, I dabble in both. And even though they may look very similar to the person who's not really familiar with the instrument, they are completely different techniques when it talks about learning to play those. Yeah,
which I didn't really embrace at first either. So I started playing bass in Cobra, and I played it like a guitar, And it was cool, actually. We played with a lot of really amazing bands that had incredible bass players, and they're like, you're weird and wild, and I like that. And so I was
it's interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the most part, usually the bass is not a very melodic instrument, but essentially you can...
it depends. I mean, sort of, it can be.
Right, I'm saying it can be.
Which I got into later, so like I kind of, I did this for years and years and years, doing pick scrapes and all that stuff.
Sure.
I didn't really get into like understanding like real bass playing until almost after my time in Cobra, because at that point, towards the end, we were doing a lot of heavier synth stuff, so like I had a synth on stage and I'll play bass and I'll just switch back and forth between the two almost every other song.
Yeah.
For some of our bigger singles, we're like very synth heavy. Toward the end, we had a couple big radio hits. And at that point, when I left the band, I guess, we can take it to that point, shortly before it ended, I started getting into producing and songwriting. And I was like, you know what? I just kind of started like listening to music differently. I mean, I was already doing a lot of electronic music production, remixing and stuff like that for many years at that point. And I was like, I want to kind of just take a different approach to it. And bass had been such a big focus for me at that point, playing it live every night, that I started making a big part of my production and sound, which is why I started incorporating it in dance music, because I started doing a lot of DJing. Like Cobra started doing a lot of DJ gigs and stuff like that on tour, which is amazing because we got to do like DJ huge festivals.
Sure.
Yeah. We started tapping into a totally different market.
Right. Smart. And I think
Yeah.
it's another really big gem. I feel like this is something that happens these days quite a bit. You have artists who they have kind of like their DJ set and they have like a band set that they can do. And then sometimes even the band members will play multiple gigs as DJs under the kind of the umbrella of the band name.
Big time, big time. We started doing that toward the end where like Ryland and I would go DJ. Gabe would go and do like events where he sings, like 3 songs with a DJ.
That's cool.
And so our friend Jeffrey, rest in peace, who is no longer with us, was an amazing DJ here in the city. And he was really good friends with us. He would play all the big clubs and he would travel with Gabe sometimes to do all the big top 40 clubs because he just like destroyed that scene. And then he would play like 3 songs, they would just party. Gabe's like the ultimate party animal.
Sure.
So it works out perfectly. Get the man a bottle of tequila and you're gonna have a show, let me tell you. And so he just sings 3 songs, makes everybody happy and they're all pumped he's there, getting hammered, dancing.
Sure, everybody's having a good time.
It was a great time, yeah. So we got to kind of do that a lot, which was cool. And honestly, I would give that piece of advice to any band that's touring. Like, even rock bands, I see rock bands do it. I seen grind metal bands, like the Locusts, like those guys go and DJ after parties. Like if you're on tour, get yourself an after party that you can DJ and just make some extra money on. Even if it's a couple $100, you get some free beers for you and your friends, you know, and you kind of get to have a little night after, celebrate your show, make a little extra dough. Always the best way to just kind of double tap, you know? As long as the promoter doesn't get mad that you're doing it at the show and like, well, we're not playing, so. For a band, it's easier. For a DJ, it's kind of harder to do that. Yeah,
and I think actually, just real quick, you touched on something, because a lot of times bands will have specific agreements in place where they can only do that venue in that city for a given period of time, right?
Yeah.
As a exclusive to the club to help from negotiation. That might not include DJing. So, you know, in certain situations, the band may be able to play their normal set, do their performance, but then the members can DJ outside, kind of doing like an appearance more, and the appearance is billed as a DJ set.
Yeah.
And smart. That's very smart.
Totally. I mean, rock band, like rock DJing is kind of what I started doing in the city. So like you can totally do that and just play songs. Just play songs you like. People are there to see you, hear the vibe. I think it's really a great way. You know, I used to DJ a lot of funk and soul and like 60s rock and 70s rock and stuff like that. And people had a good time.
And you learn stuff from that, right, too? Because I think, you know, if you get too much stuck in the songwriter world and you get tunnel vision, I learned a lot from DJing when it came to, like, music production.
Yeah.
You know, so for me personally, I do a lot of sample packs and stuff like that. So, like, my thing when I'm building songs, I'm trying to think about how it would translate to certain places. And if I've never been in a club or if I've never been in a place where the DJ is the primary focus, it's hard to kind of imagine what that would be, you know? So I think it teaches you a lot about arrangement, composition, all that kind of stuff as well as far as pop music goes.
For sure. I mean, just kind of listening to it differently. And then, I mean, even producing dance music after DJing, you kind of get inspired to be like, okay, like what reacts with people and like, what's going to work in that space.
Sure. So let's fast forward a little bit. So Quincy Boy, right? So this is something recent, if I'm, relatively recent from what, past year, right? Is that?
Yeah, actually almost 1 year now.
Yeah, I remember, I think when you were starting this out. And I mean, you've been working with some amazing talent, man, putting out some amazing records yourself.
Thank you.
So give us the modern lefty. You know, what have you been doing in the last year?
Oh yeah, so the last year's actually been pretty incredible. I mean, coming out of like the lockdown and last summer kind of starting to open up, I really wanted to figure out, the whole pandemic situation has obviously been weird, but I really went for it and I just started trying to get as many releases as I could because a lot of people slowed down. So I said, you know what, I'm just gonna try and get shit on every label out there that can help me because they're probably looking for records too. And like, people wanna save records. This was prime time for somebody like me to sneak in and get out there. Sure. And I totally did. I feel like I got some incredible releases on some very reputable labels that I admire and put out some really great music that, you know, I really love a lot. So that was important to me. And then I really wanted to focus on gigs because getting more gigs was my focus right before the pandemic. Sure. I had just brought on new management then who lined up a whole bunch of touring.
Yeah, you were well, you were, before we kind of went down again for Omicron, you were starting to pick up a little bit.
Yes, totally.
And then we got hit with that wall of Omicron.
Then we got hit with the wall, which is kind of cool. I mean, like, it's been weird, honestly, like coming back into the gigs. Like I started getting put on some really amazing gigs and I've DJ'd a lot with Rich here in the city, which has been really fun. And getting on some newer events and stuff like that was really amazing, but it was kind of weird because like half the people I know were like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere public right now. And then you go to these events and everybody's like, I'm here to party. It's like, how can I live 2 lives? So I tried to do it really carefully, you know? Sure. I wanted to kind of protect everybody who was nervous. Like I went down to see my family for Thanksgiving and stuff like that. So I had some gigs shortly after then. Went out to Denver, did my first New Year's Eve headliner
I saw
on New
that.
Year's Eve, which was really exciting. And coming up, I got some very exciting gigs here at some bigger clubs in New York.
Nice.
Nebula, which is like brand new.
It's huge, yeah.
Yeah, very nice place.
Yeah, man. That's great. Well, so what about music-wise? What do you have coming out?
Music-wise,
I know
yeah.
you got the compilation coming out here soon.
Yep. Quincy Boy Records is dropping our very first compilation called Friends and Family Volume 1.
Congrats,
which
that's awesome.
has, thank you. It's very exciting. Started receiving a lot of demos, you know, which was kind of cool to see. Like we started the label just to kind of have me self-release music.
Sure.
You know, it's like, hey, we can push out more, we can put our own money into it and know where it's going.
Sure.
And
Collect
you know,
all the
we have our own
royalties.
channels. Yeah, and collect all the money basically, and then fund it, and then keep doing that, and then we can get the label going.
Sure.
But then I kind of got really excited about running a label. I was like, man, there's a lot of potential here. And I feel like with my experience in the songwriting world, when I got into that after Cobra, which is songwriting and producing, being in the publishing world and doing all these things, felt like I could piece together things that a lot of regular dance labels don't really offer, because they just crank out releases. In the dance world, it's just like singles, and they're just trying to put as much as they can out there, and maybe something will grab.
Sure.
And it sucks for like an up and coming artist who doesn't really know how the deals work and see how maybe those deals aren't totally in their favor, or realizing the things that they're not getting exposure to that the label should be supplying them with.
Sure.
So I wanted to kind of start something that I can offer a little bit more and be totally transparent, you know? And that's kind of the idea behind Quincy Boy. So I started releasing some friends of mine and acquaintances that I know that have been like communicating with me through my music and their music. We would support each other. I was like, hey, like I'm starting a label. They were all pumped. And I'm like, you want to release an EP or something? Let's do it. And people got really excited. So I wanted to make it really worth their time. And I just locked in like a licensing partner.
Ooh,
that's going to do all our sync
Huge.
and licensing pitching. Yeah, which is very exciting because I feel like you don't get that a lot.
No, man, that's great.
In the dance world.
That's where the money is, really.
That's where the money is, yeah, you know. And so I'm really excited to be able to offer that and just kind of and share knowledge and experience with people that don't understand how label deals work, how publishing works, and you know, at least.
That's interesting too, because this is one of the reasons that we love to work with Lefty here at Sound Collective. If you guys listen to what you just said, it sounds like a lot of mentoring, really. So you're working with a lot of artists, trying to teach them about the business based on your experiences.
Totally.
So let's transition into that, because as one of the lead mentors here at the Sound Collective, I know that you've been in education for a while. How important do you think, or actually I shouldn't even say that, because we've kind of already established music education is an important thing to a certain aspect, whether you're learning on your own, whether you're learning at a college, whether you're learning at an academy-style school. But more importantly, one thing that we really try to push here at the school is progressive music education, really staying at the front leading edge of education and community. So how do you see music education in the next 5 years? How do you feel like it's going to change? What's the trajectory we're heading towards?
I think the trajectory that we're heading toward in music education, I feel like there's two types of music education, you know? There's learning instruments, which is like a technical standpoint. And I think that will turn into more like video game type structures to some degree. Although there is a lot that you don't get from that, like history. I feel like you want to learn how to play piano, it'll be like Guitar Hero.
Sure.
You know, which I think might even already exist.
Yeah, it's actually interesting you said that, because I know that with Oculus, there's a pass-through thing where you can put on like an Oculus headset, and when you look at it, it'll actually, as you touch keys, it'll show
amazing.
like,
Yeah, I
how
feel
it
like
is.
I did
So
see that.
AR and VR, I think you're right, will be kind of, or even doing like the melodics thing, where it's essentially like playing along with it. It's kind of cool too.
Yeah, I mean, because it's kind of how you learn songs when you're learning. It's like you figure out songs, and it's going to be ways to teach you that way, I think. But you know, there's also like the business side of music industry, which you can read, but I feel like it's better to have a conversation with somebody about that who had their experience, and yours could be totally different, but there are definitely some like foundation, there's definitely like some core like elements there that like apply to everything. It could just go any way from there.
Sure.
Which is really interesting. But, and I don't know, I think there's something that you'll just always get from human interaction in one-on-one situation like that.
Sure.
Because you can ask questions. You can't ask questions to like a video game digitally.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it'll be both. I mean, I think the human element will always be around, but there's just gonna be a lot more ways to kind of learn technical things that are more,
Well, make music accessible to more people too.
Yeah, and it already is so accessible.
Sure.
I mean, I'm curious actually what music production is gonna turn into down the line, because
that is actually very interesting.
they're now really expanding on the ability to like make your own stems from pre-recorded songs. And I don't know, I think eventually it's gonna turn into, you know, seeing a concept like stem and all these like sample packs. that make it really accessible to just drop a bunch of stuff in and make a song from that.
Sure.
And old school producers are like, that's not producing music. And I kind of embrace it. I'm like, you know what, it is. It's just the way now.
Well, it's totally, and I think you kind of touched this a little bit earlier about the electronic world and content. Perfect example, right? So I think nowadays with the social media world, you're constantly have to release so much content, right? And it's hard for an artist. I mean, you know this firsthand. Touring, you know, not being away from home, being away from a stereotypical creative space because you're so stressed or tired from doing all these shows and different things like that. A lot of these guys that are out there, guys and girls, need stems and stuff like that to create and be able to work on the fly, you know, and be able to create new ideas to put out so you kind of stay relevant. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it is with algorithms and all the things that determine that. You know, it's an interesting world, man. I think you're right. I think stems are going to be a big part of the future of music.
Totally, dude. Yeah. I'm thinking back right now, I just had a flashback to, we did a tour with Fall Out Boy on the Honda Civic tour, which is like a massive shed tour. It's like 20,000 people a night. And Patrick was producing our second album on that tour. And dude, he made all the demos in GarageBand with just nasty sounds, and we kept a lot of them. And I thought that was so fascinating. I was like, dude, you're not using Logic? He's like, no. I was like, and he goes in and he sings his demos in his tour bus, and he made a bunch of demos there. Gabe would go and write with him, and we had a couple songs that we made. He had a bunch of demos that he made, and we got back. We all went into a studio together and made the album with him too, which was amazing.
That's crazy.
That guy is such an incredible talent. Man.
That's crazy. Well, I think you just touched on another point too. It's important for people to understand that all this stuff, the stuff behind us, the iPad, the computers, they're all tools of the trade. And however you need to do that to express yourself, just because somebody plays an instrument doesn't make them any better than the person who knows how to program, right? As far as the general population goes. So that's a very interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, touching on that real quick, one last thing. I'm a big fan of using stems and sample packs like that, because I personally try to make them sound different, because like when you get something that's really popular, you can hear like, oh, I know that sound. It's like, give it to me, I'll use it, and I'll make it sound nothing like that. And make it cool and unique.
That's very cool.
I think if you're gonna use those things, it's important to try to make them your own. You know, that's always the thing that I always
so just looping it up, just change it a little bit.
Exactly.
That's good. Well, Lefty, thank you, man. I appreciate you coming by for our first episode, man. If you guys are interested in learning with Lefty, Lefty teaches private lessons here at Sound Collective. He's our lead mentor in our new music entrepreneurship certificate program. And he also has some courses on our Sound Collective platform where you can get 14 days for free right now, and even join us for some live classes that are part of that monthly subscription. So we hope to see you in the future. Stay tuned for more episodes right here at the Sound Collective.